Welcome to the first real episode of Street Sex Psychology. The last one was more of an introduction. This time we're actually going to start getting into the meat of things. Now, I do want to be very cautious to explain sort of complicated stuff in a way that doesn't sound in any way condescending to anyone. But because of the disconnect between the academic world and the world that people work in, I just don't see anybody doing it. I don't see anybody explaining these things. Or if they do, they're biased as hell. Now, I'm biased too. I'm an unreliable narrator because everybody has their own inherent biases. I do, so do you. But I'll do my best. Now, this episode is going to focus on the identification of misinformation. Okay, so you might know that more commonly as fake news. Now, before I started studying, I had a hell of a hard time differentiating between what's real and what isn't. I mean, how can you tell? It took me many years. It took me until a good 3 years into my degree before I started to get a handle on this stuff. Because misinformation is designed to be confusing. It's designed to muddy the waters. Okay, that's the point of it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, how to identify it. Now, I'm not going to present this in a way that, if you were an academic, you'd go, oh, I'm going to use these theories, and there's enough of that in the world. I'm actually going to try and explain it to how I would explain it to myself before I started studying. Okay, so to start with, why does this fake news exist? Okay, it exists to achieve something. If somebody or one of their proxies is putting in the effort to create and disseminate information that is knowingly false, that's only done because they're aiming to get something out of it. Now, that might be to sow the seeds of political confusion, political discord, social discord. All of these things can be used in a way that's beneficial to, let's say, nefarious actors. So this fake news business has really taken off in the last 6 or so years. And now, I think part of the problem is a layover from the pre-internet time, when if you saw something written in the newspaper or it was on the news at 7 o'clock, you'd go, well, that's the news. That's what it is. You don't exactly have you might be able to get a more left-leaning paper or more right-leaning paper or a tabloid or whatever, but what you were going to get is you sort of intrinsically took what you saw as being the case. Now, because we've got a layover from that, we still have an inherent bias to trust stuff we see written down. Now, a good example of this would be memes. Okay, memes where you've got your picture and you've got a description of this is what happened and why it's bad. None of those have ever been fact-checked, not one. Every meme that's ever been made or sort of story about something in a picture, it's either fake, like entirely fabricated, or it's taken out of context. Because it's simply not possible to describe such complex things in a picture on the internet with words. But because we have this sort of inherent bias towards believing what we see, it actually makes that a pretty effective way of spreading misinformation. Another part of that is that most of us are incredibly busy, especially those who aren't so well off. I know I'm busy as hell. We don't have time or the inclination necessarily to actually go through all this stuff and try and fact check it. So let's try and some simple strategies to do so. Now, to begin, let's do a simple critical analysis. Okay, the article or the picture or whatever you're trying to read, what kind of words do they employ? And I don't mean this in an academic sense. I mean this in just a conversational sense. So if an article is using a lot of very hyperbolic language, very exaggerated, it's hard to explain, but that's why I'm doing this. If it's really overwritten and it's really, oh, this is so bad, and they're trying to achieve something. Now, that goes left and right. There's no necessary differentiation between the two. Both of them, these broad groups, have parts of which they've produced this fake news to try and get their agenda across. So if you read even a newspaper, read a tabloid paper compared to a broadsheet paper. And the broadsheet will tend to be written in a pretty straightforward and balanced kind of way, whereas your tabloid, small papers, bright pictures and whatnot, they're full of opinion pieces as opposed to factual information. And one of the big problems I see is that people get opinion pieces and the news confused. Okay, and an opinion piece or an editorial is not fact. It's not based in fact. It's an emotive argument. And emotion is a very powerful thing. A lot of the arguments you see both politically and in the press and with social groups is based in emotion, not fact. You've got to be very careful to try and draw a line between what are words that are trying to exaggerate or put across a certain perspective and what is actually happening. It does take time to do, but it can be done. It can be done. But yeah, if an article or even a meme or whatever, if it's really overwritten and really these people are, look, it might be true, but it's probably not. So read it twice. Next, um, who owns the source of what you're reading? If you're reading a newspaper, or let's say the newspaper, or watching the television news, who owns it? Is it News Corporation? Is it Fairfax? Is it? That's a really, really good place to start. Okay, so if you read, and online, if you read from, say, the Pro Mining Council put out a press release on Facebook, right? That's going to read a hell of a lot differently to an anti-mining press release on Facebook. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the middle, but they're going to be both sort of put in separate, trying to achieve separate aims. So look, who owns the source? Who owns the Facebook page, the newspaper? Who's the sub-owner? Who is a part of a shell company that's owned by a bigger one? Okay, you've got to think about things like that. And once you can figure out who's creating the content, you can often pretty easily trace what the political bent of that group might be. And every single media organisation in the world has a political bent. Majority of media in the world is actually right-wing, which people don't believe, and we will be getting right into that in another topic. But that's not the point. Just try and make sure who owns the paper or the site or whatever you're reading, because they will have an opinion that is put through the editorial team. Okay, so yeah, and who's paying? Follow the money. You hear this follow the money thing a lot, but yeah, it can just about lead anywhere. Pretty interesting. But yeah, the keywords, look for how it's written. Is it overdone? Then they're really, really trying to tell you something that they want you to think. Okay. And the other one is look at who owns the content. And as a final one, the truth's often in the middle, no matter where you get it from. Often get two conflicting sources of information and look down the middle. It's often a good way to do it. Now, none of these means are traditionally, apart from the critical analysis, of course, none of these means are traditionally academic. But I've found in my own experiences that they're quite effective. It does take time, but practice makes perfect. Now, for my next videos, I'm wondering which way to go. If I'm going to go, for the time being, if I'm going to continue with this sort of stuff, or later on I might actually go into some personal experiences I've had in the world that are sociological in nature, where I've observed things happening in the real world, things that are very interesting. I might be able to do more videos on that later if anyone's interested, but for the time being, I'll stick to the script. Thanks.